Welcome to the Get Fit with Jodelle show. I'm Jodelle, and I'm so excited to have somebody on the show with me today that I've been wanting to interview for quite some time. His name is Dr. Shawn Baker, and he's someone I've come to greatly respect. And I ask that all of you will, as I always say, wipe the slate clean of the dogma that we've been preached to by mainstream nutrition and listen to what Dr. Baker has to say. You will find it fascinating, and yet at the same time, you might have some jaw-dropping moments with this podcast too. But I simply ask that as you guys listen, whatever biased thoughts come up about nutrition, that you just listen all the way through and understand there is scientific basis behind what Dr. Baker is sharing with you today. So I've asked him to come on the podcast because I'm so intrigued and frankly uber excited about the research that I myself have discovered while looking into Dr. Baker and also to this topic. And I think you guys will be too. So Dr. Baker is a 51-year-old orthopedic surgeon and a multi-sport world champion athlete, specifically with regard to the Concept 2 rower, correct?
Yeah, that's where I'm currently, that's what I'm currently beating myself up on. So yeah, that's my sport of choice lately.
And what your other favorite sports as well that maybe you hold some championships in?
When I competed in powerlifting, I was a deadlifting national record holder. I once won the Highland Games World Championships as a masters athlete. So those are things that I've done in the last decade or so.
Fantastic.
Some stuff when I was younger.
There's some rugby in your past as well, right?
Yeah, I went down to New Zealand, got to play in their Premier League, and I got to play at the high levels, got to play against a lot of the New Zealand All Blacks, and I've done some track and field type stuff as well. So it's been just a varied background where I'm just real competitive and ended up fortunate enough to making it to a high level in a number of different sports. I did the strongman stuff for, a handful of years as well and got, pretty decent results in that as well. So, but I'm just continuing to go on. I imagine it'll be fun to see what I'm doing at 90. It might be, who knows? It might be ping pong. We'll see.
Oh, don't sell yourself so short. But I think the most fascinating thing about you is that you have now been over a year on a strict carnivore, meaning all meat diet or protocol, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I hit the 1 year point in December. So it's now, what are we on, January 13th? So yeah, a year and a couple weeks now.
And that's specifically why I wanted to talk to you, is because I've always advocated protein to my listeners, but now there's this kind of, I guess you want to call it a trend, but I don't know that it necessarily needs to be called that, because it's actually something that if we look back into our ancestry as humans, it was going on way before it ever became a trend, but it's this all meat kind of carnivore diet that's coming out. And I guess I want to call you kind of the instigator of it. Is that okay to call you that?
Well, I want to give credit where credit's due. I mean, there have been people who have been doing this for quite a while. I pointed them out, and I try to continue to give those guys credit because they inspired me. I have been very vocal about it, and obviously the fact that I have MD behind my name, the fact that I'm, setting records and stuff like that sort of makes it a little more public. And the fact that a lot of the folks, unfortunately, that were doing it were getting harassed, and so they kind of had to sort of hide from the public. And I just because I've seen such good results and so many people improve their health dramatically with me, I just don't feel it's worth hiding. I think we should celebrate it, and we should let people know about it. And so for whatever reason, I've become kind of a lightning rod for this, growing movement or knowledge base, however you want to call it. And I'm happy to do that. Some of it is I'm understanding, that entertainment is part of this. And so some of the stuff is, me jumping around and doing kind of crazy athletic things is entertaining for people. And I tend to, just try to make some, very, sometimes outrageous things. It seems outrageous, but I try to keep the science behind it. But I think you have to entertain people before they'll even listen to you. And so that's kind of how I've sort of done with this so far.
Well, you've definitely got a lot of knowledge too. So I guess as a doctor, you don't normally hear doctors look so much into nutrition, but knowing what I know about you, you actually dove pretty deep into nutrition as a doctor. So can you talk me through kind of like what got you into nutrition as a surgeon?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, it was just my own health, because I'd been an athlete my whole life, and training hard, and I was still competing at world-class levels, even, granted some of it was at master's level stuff because I gotten older, but mid 40s, I started to just, have issues with my health. I couldn't get rid of weight I wanted to get rid of. I had blood pressure issues. Sleep was not like I wanted to. I probably was developing sleep apnea. I think I was probably pre-diabetic, and I just said, I'm just not going to do that. I work too hard, and I'm smart enough to figure it out. So I just went through a whole kind of spectrum of different diets. I tried to try to find the one that worked best for me. And the end result was I ended up here. But I went through a low fat, almost plant-based,
Haven't we all?
minimal, a little bit of lean chicken, a little bit of lean fish.
Yeah.
Stuff like that for a while, and I found out not to be sustainable. Then I went into, the paleo for a while, and I enjoyed that. And then I just, as I kept reading and studying, I gradually, ended up on a ketogenic diet for a couple of years. And then the more I looked at it, the more I wanted to improve my performance. I eventually started looking about these people that were doing, an all meat diet. And I thought I'd just try it. I thought I keep an open mind and try it because, everything I sort of thought I knew about nutrition thus far had proven to be incorrect. So when I tried it, I just noted I got really, really good results. And so that's where I'm at now. And I'm continuing to do it, continuing to have very good results.
That's great. So why the carnivore diet? Like, how did you get started, and kind of what compelled you to go all meat exactly? I know you looked into
again, and just reading some of the people that had done it and seeing how they were doing with their health. I had still had, despite noticing significant improvements on those other diets, I still had some health issues, particularly tendonitis, a few other minor things that were still bugging me. And I also wanted to continue pushing my sports performance. And so I started reading about guys like Vince Carandas from the 1950s. He was a bodybuilder who advocated a steak and eggs diet. Although he included a refeed day in there, but still, I saw the good results he was getting. I saw all these other people, and I said, I'd just give it a try. And within a few weeks, I started to feel really good. And then after doing it for a few months, all the issues that I had health-wise, basically just went away. I had, as an orthopedic surgeon, tendonitis is something I see every single day and treat it all the time. And I know it can be very difficult to get rid of. And me in particular, I can never get rid of this quadriceps tendonitis despite applying all the knowledge I'd gained as a surgeon. And literally within a couple months, it vanished and has never come back. So I thought that was just it's really interesting to see that stuff.
Well, yeah. And after watching you on Joe Rogan, that's what got me interested. As I saw your podcast, and I was like, this guy has some great ideas, and he's got some great research behind him too. And so I have always advocated for people to eat protein, but not to this degree until I really started looking into it. Especially, I know I had mentioned to you about the book, The Stone Age Diet, that's from like 1975, that I think should be on everyone's shelf. I think this book is wise beyond its time, and I think it needs to be on the shelf of every human because it's kind of the diet for humans. So what prompted me was my husband is a deer hunter, and he brings, this is deer hunting season right now in the Midwest, and he's been bringing home deer. And I thought one day while I was cooking, I was like, if we lived in a tent or a shack in the middle of the woods and every day he just had to go get our food, what could he get right now in the dead of winter? Nothing but meat. And so this was all during the time I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm going, hey, wait a second. Like, if nothing else, I really kind of feel like it would serve people to be in this kind of all meat carnivore mentality during a certain time of year, like this season of winter that we're in, because it goes along with the natural circadian rhythm of humans of like, you wouldn't find fruits and vegetables in the forest when you're foraging. You're not even hardly going to find berries. Maybe you're just going to have access to meat. And so I really wanted to hear what you thought about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I had a patient that I ended up, she was in her 80s, and I actually replaced her hip, a few years ago. And there was actually a movie made about her. It's called The Year of the Caribou, and a small movie that probably no one's ever seen. But it documents the fact that she and her husband back in the 1960s went up to live in the remote wilds of Alaska. And she lived on nothing but caribou, basically. That's all she had. She did it for 18 years. Wow. And when I asked her about it, I asked her about her health, and she said it was the best health she's ever had of her life. And so that's just kind of interesting that, you have these stories like this. This is another one I often forget to mention that story, but it's just remarkable. And so there's like I said, if you ever want to look up that movie, it's called Year of the Caribou. It's not a very exciting movie, but it's just these two people out in the woods, out in Alaska, and they live on nothing but caribou. There's no people around, and that's something that
Well,
I
I
think
just
that's a
wrote it
lot of
down.
us.
Definitely look it up because it definitely anything like that intrigues me. I want to see how. I always want to go back to the logical sense of what you could do if you didn't have access to a grocery store and a convenience store in every corner. Like how would you live?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people, they talk about all the variety. We have unlimited amounts of variety, particularly here in the United States and other Western countries. I mean, we have 55 flavors of water and 72 flavors of potato chips and 95 flavors of ice cream, and none of that stuff existed. And now we can't even fathom the fact that we can't have 3 flavors of ice cream.
Right.
And so it's like, if you were to go back, 20, 30,000 years ago, I mean, there's just humans, just like any other animal, didn't have a huge variety of food to eat. Undoubtedly we ate a lot of meat. Certainly did we eat some berries from time to time and a few other plants that might have been edible? Sure, we probably did. But what we survived on and what we allowed us to thrive was the other animals, because the fact that we spread across the entire globe, the only thing that was consistently available, berries that you might have found or fruits you might have found in Africa, you're not going to find the same stuff in Northern Europe. You're not going to find that stuff in North America. So there's no consistency. The only thing that's consistent is animals, and we clearly can live on an animal-based diet, as I've shown, thousands of other people have shown, and all these historical populations have shown. And a lot of people will say, like, well, the Inuit had, whale blubber that had vitamin C, or muktuk, or, but they're inland Inuits that lived on caribou. I mean, so it's clear that we can do this. It's clear that we have that human capacity. All of us have that conserved capacity to do that.
I definitely want to get to your N equals many study and talk about that too, so that they know kind of the many people that you've researched on this and the results you've had. I'm really curious about that. But even I wanted to touch on even the fact that Stone Age diet book, it had talked about hunger, going back to the 33 flavors of ice cream, that you were talking about. I think sometimes we misplace hunger, and people will think, well, I could never do an all meat diet because I'd have so much hunger for other things. But yet I think we misplace hunger, because a lot of times when you're really hungry, you could eat whatever is put before you. Like if you're starving and you're out in the wilderness and all that you have is meat, then it's going to be the best meat ever because you're starving. Whereas these people that go to a restaurant and sit down and they have like umpteen thousand choices on the menu, and they have to decide because they're not actually that hungry. They're looking at it and they're going, this is what I want versus what I need. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but there's a different aspect. I think we forget what hunger actually is.
Yeah, I mean, we have tremendous choice now, and like I said, we are humans or animals just like any other animal. I look at my dogs. I mean, they eat the same food
Right.
every single day for their whole life, and every time it's time to eat, they're super excited. They're salivating. They're jumping up and down. They're super excited to eat the same old thing every day. And I think
Mm-hmm.
humans are the same way. It's just now that we have all this different flavor variety that we feel that we have to do that. And it's not that eating a steak every day in any way tastes bad. I mean, it's
Yeah.
delicious. Every time it's delicious. It's not like you're sitting there suffering through another steak. I mean, literally, I had, I just got done eating a bunch of ground beef and a ribeye for breakfast, and I loved every bite, and I'll love every bite I have tonight. And so it's not that you're in any way miserable doing this. It's just that you have to kind of separate yourself from sort of the social pressures, the marketing pressures that are out there. It's you listen to these companies and you're like, you haven't lived until you've tasted our, you know, whatever flavor, Snickard flavored, you
And
know, potato chip, or whatever they're coming up with, the crazy combinations they come up with. When in fact, you do so much better off eating the food that you're designed for, and
well,
I think
yeah, and
that's
protein is the building block of every single cell in our body, which we're made up of trillions of cells. So it stands to reason that when you started this hashtag, I believe it was you that started it, the meat heals. It's
Mhm.
legit because protein, the amino acids in protein are what heals our body. When we have any discrepancy whatsoever, that's what's going to be the building blocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's the protein and of course the fat too. I mean, it's very simple and reductionist to talk about this way, but you and I are we're made up of animal tissue. I mean, it's clear, and every one of our cells, our animal cells, contain what we need in it. So if we were to eat the same thing, not that I'm advocating cannibalism, but I mean, basically eating other animal tissue basically provides you everything you need to build animal tissue. It's very simple. Now you can do that from plants, but it's a much less efficient process. And there's some negatives that come with that. And as many people find out, particularly anyone that's been on a high fiber diet will notice a lot of digestive discomfort. A lot of times, a lot of women that have been forced to eat the salad with the dressing on the side for years and years, they're always complaining about being bloated and their stomach hurts. And I think it's just because we're not well designed to extract nutrition from high fiber plant foods. It's just that we just lost some of that capacity. That's where our, that's what distinguishes us from the other primates. I mean, our digestive tract has changed significantly from when, when we sort of branched off from that part of the primate evolutionary tree. And so we don't have good capacity to do that anymore. We have some, which is probably, we're clearly omnivorous, and that's probably allowed us a survival adaptation advantage. But how do we thrive? I think we thrive on an animal-based diet. And I think we're finding that out, that the more people do this, they're finding the same thing I do, that you feel the best you've ever felt and you function really well and your health issues get better, which is really cool.
Well, and to that effect, I'll say that I have now been doing this all meat carnivore diet for 13 days. And this is a pretty personal subject to tell you, but prior to starting this, I had, and you don't even know this yet because I haven't told you, but prior to starting this, I hadn't had a period in 7 months. And 1 week into the diet, my period started. And I know that's pretty personal to talk about, but I wanted to put it out there that just showed how quickly my body was lacking something that I was continuing to give it, and or maybe eliminating something that wasn't working for me, even though I was mainly eating, fats and proteins and vegetables. And so some part of that healed my issue, whatever that issue was that I hadn't quite figured out yet. And I think that's really powerful. And I've heard numerous testimonies by people that are following you, and then part of that N equals many study that are saying the same thing. So there's some validity to this. I don't want people to balk their head at this and walk away, because there's definitely some validity. So before we get into, I want you to dispel some myths and some misconceptions along with eating an all meat diet. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about your typical day, like so just in a day life of you, like all meat, drink water, what's that look like? Well, what's your typical day look like?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I generally fall into a pattern where I eat either 2 meals a day or sometimes 1 meal a day, and that often revolves around when I'm going to train exercise-wise. The majority of the time, it'll be breakfast. And I eat quite a bit because I'm a big guy. I'm 240 pounds and a pretty active athlete, and so I generally eat about 4 pounds a day, which is, it's shocking to most people, but it's pretty standard. I think most people, when they do this, end up eating about 2 pounds a day, maybe a little more. Active athletes tend to eat quite a bit more, but I'll generally eat maybe 2 pounds for breakfast. I generally, if I'm going to work out, I usually let a few hours pass before training. So maybe over my lunch hour, I may go train, and then I'll eat again, maybe around 6 p.m., something like that. So I'll generally have about 2 meals, and then I'll go, 14, 16, 18 hours between my, overnight before I start my next meal again. So I don't intermittent fast, but I eat infrequently, and there's a subtle difference behind it, because a lot of people ask me about, intentionally fasting, and I think once your diet is, once you're eating what you're supposed to be eating, then your hunger signals are well aligned to when you're supposed to eat. And so I think, one of the things I say is you should probably eat to hunger, but many people will find that they'll go many, many hours between eating, and so you get some of the benefits of quote unquote intermittent fasting. So I like to use the term intermittent feasting. So I'll just eat a big meal of, steak or whatever, and then I'll be full, and I won't want to eat again for, 10, 12 hours, maybe longer. And so I think that works pretty well.
That, because while I've been eating this way, I have not thought about food. You get to a point where you're like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. I guess I should make dinner, Whereas I've always been somebody with kind of a high metabolism, high hyperglycemia a little bit, where I would just get a little bit of high and low blood sugars and stuff. Just even eating ketosis. I mean, even when I was in ketosis, I would feel that feeling of like, oh, I'm low, I better go eat something. But never, not one day on this have I felt that. Like, it's just phenomenal. So yeah, that's pretty powerful. And so you have just meat. You don't do like eggs or dairy or anything like that.
And when I first started, I did a little bit more of that stuff. I just found it, I think it is. I mean, psychologically, you feel like you need a little more variety. As
Mm,
time goes by, you'll find that what you really, really want to eat is just a nice steak, a nice ribeye steak or something like that, or a T-bone. And so I will occasionally, like if I'm on vacation or out of town, I might eat steak and eggs just because it's a little more convenient. And, it gets a little more expensive, especially when you're eating in a restaurant. But dairy for me, and I think it varies from person to person, but dairy for me is kind of a net negative. I will
nice.
maybe occasionally have a little slice of cheese or a piece of nice cheese with a meal, but generally I minimize that quite a bit. I rarely have it. So the other thing is occasionally I'll have a little bit of seafood. Typically it'll be, like shrimp or something like that. I'll cook up some shrimp and some butter, and
Yeah, and
that'll
it's
make it on
actually
the menu
easy
about.
to eat all meat when you're when you're traveling. Like I just went on a trip to Florida, and like for lunch, it's easy to get peel and eat shrimp, and then for dinner, it's easy to go get a steak somewhere. And like people don't realize how easy it actually is to eat all meat. So
Yeah, I mean, if you go to a restaurant, I mean, almost unless you go to a vegetarian restaurant, you're going to find meat on the menu. I mean, it's not like that's it's kind of interesting. If you go back in some of the etymology, some of the like particularly some of the Scandinavian languages, the actual definition of food is meat, or meat is the actual definition of food. That when they say food back then, it was meat. And so
okay,
everything else was like deer food. Like the grains were considered food for the animals. And so
yeah.
meat it's ubiquitous, at least in our country, and it's very easy to find.
And so, to that, I want to switch to talking about the myths and the misconceptions. You mentioned deer, and deer eat vegetation. And so, would it stand to reason then that when we eat the deer, like I eat all my husband's catches that he brings home, that we're actually getting vitamin C? We're actually getting what the deer has eaten from the ground, yes?
Yeah. So the one of the biggest sort of concerns people have is around vitamin C, and I think I've put several links about that, and I think some people have done some nice research on this. But I think one of the things we've known for greater than 100 years is that fresh meat would cure scurvy and it would prevent scurvy. And one of the problems with the English sailors is they would eat dried meat. It wouldn't be fresh meat, and they'd eat a high carbohydrate, what they call hardtack diet, which is just a bunch of dried out biscuits and stuff like that. And that was their diet, and they got scurvy in those cases. But when they were exposed to fresh meat, it went away. It doesn't have to be like you just kill the animal right away. It's stuff you can get in the supermarket. That's as long as it's not dried out, then you're going to have enough vitamin C in there. Even though the USDA didn't ever actually test it, there is some, and they just assumed it to be zero, but there's actually some in meat, and there's enough to prevent you from having scurvy. And the other thing that's interesting is when you have a carbohydrate-based metabolism, we know that your requirement for a number of different vitamins and minerals are increased. The carbohydrate metabolism requires all these cofactors, which we get from vitamins. So when you're not digesting and utilizing carbohydrates, you don't have those needs anymore. So a lot of the things that the RDA tells us we need is based on you eating carbohydrates. And so we have to kind of revisit all that stuff. The other thing that's interesting about vitamin C is the more glucose you have in your body or inside cells, they compete with the transport of vitamin C because they're similar molecules. And so that if we have a lot of glucose floating around, our vitamin C requirements go up.
Yeah, and
And
I don't think people have heard that. I don't think people know about how carbohydrates actually create more of a need for the vitamins and minerals that we think we're supposed to just slam our bodies with, versus if we're not taking them in, we're not setting up the stage for the losses that we're experiencing.
yeah,
Correct?
exactly. So a carbohydrate diet impacts our requirements for vitamins in a number of ways. One is, like I said, carbohydrate metabolism drives up the need for those vitamins and minerals, but also the foods that they come in, the plant-based foods that they come in, make them harder to acquire. They're harder to absorb. They're not as bioavailable. They're often come in forms that we don't utilize as well. Fiber in particular binds up a lot of minerals. There's phytates in there that block absorption of a number of things. And so, not only is requirement higher on a carbohydrate diet, but the vitamins and minerals are then also less bioavailable in the foods that you eat them in. So it's like a double-edged, it's like a double whammy that you're really lacking in vitamins and nutrients. And so probably some of these vitamin deficiency syndromes that we're seeing might just be increased by the fact that we're eating a higher and higher carbohydrate-based diet. And also that a lot of that food is actually very poor in nutrition anyway.
Right, I would totally agree. And now I'm sure you get the question, what about my kidneys? What about too much protein in my kidneys, you know?
Yeah, that's another common misconception. There's no evidence that protein damages kidneys.
Right.
One of the myths that goes around it is that damaged kidneys will spill protein. That's because the kidney's been damaged, but it's not the protein that's causing the damage. It's just the fact that because it's no longer as effective at filtering it out, it just spills it out. There's been some studies. A guy named Jose Antonio has done a couple of research papers where he's exposed people to up to 4 grams of protein per pound a day with no negative effect at all. And so we don't really know if there's any upper limit to how much protein we can handle.
Well, and I
I
would
know
say the damage that would be occurring that would spill the protein was due to an acidic condition caused by sugar more likely than too much protein, correct?
well, I mean, certainly I think the things that damage other tissues, and it's possible that sugar, it's possible that oxidized omega-6 fat found in vegetable oils and some of the, even possibly some of the toxins that the pesticides found in plants might contribute to damage. I don't think that, we're seeing that from meat, quite honestly. I think it's from those other things that's causing the damage. And that's where, we're seeing that, it's interesting. I've seen, as I've been studying these people, I've seen a number of people that actually had kidney disease and noted that improved on an all meat diet, which is kind of interesting to see.
Again, maybe the building blocks of the protein can help to rebuild some of the damaged cells in the kidneys.
Yeah, it's one of the things you see as people age. A lot of things, there's this thing called sarcopenia where people lose muscle mass. They also become osteoporotic. Their bone sorts to, leach, you lose minerals and protein in the bone. The skin gets thinner. The organs shrink, the brain shrink, everything in the body shrinks as you get older. It's because the body is sort of cannibalizing its own or auto cannibalizing its own tissues, which is, meat, protein and fat. And so the fact that if you provide yourself enough of that, that tends to minimize it. And I think in a lot of cases it restores it. I think a lot of people, when they, if they've been on a bad diet for many years, I've seen people that have also shown me that their bone mineral density tests, their DEXA scans have improved on an all meat diet, which is truly fascinating to me. I mean, yeah, it shows me that you can restore some of that tissue and organ atrophy by doing something like this, which is, I think, is exciting.
Yeah, one of my nutrition books, because I'm in nutrition therapy practitioner training right now, and it was interesting to me to see the book actually say, these fruits and vegetables contain potassium and blah, 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 and these nuts and seeds, but actually meat is quite high in potassium as well. And that's not well known. Like, people don't think of eating meat as getting their potassium.
Well, the problem is, again, this is in contrast to what most people when they eat meat, it's a 3-ounce serving, right? And then you might eat that twice a day, and so that's why they're like, well, there's not that much, because no one can conceive of somebody eating 2 pounds a day or 3 pounds a day, which is what we're doing. And I think when you start doing that, you get an abundance of nutrition, and I think so. Those numbers are dramatically, again, they're more bioavailable too, and there's nothing competing with those things, and so. I think your nutrition is far better when you sort of do it that way.
And I want to touch on the fact that you mentioned about like things that are on vegetables that could also be anti-nutrient, such things as like glyphosate. I did a podcast on that recently. And so that's actually something that I've been interested in because of the fact that, we have been touted to eat our vegetables, but at the same time, they don't contain the quality of minerals and vitamins that they once did, even organic, and they're highly sprayed. So talk about that a little bit, if you have any opinion on that.
Well, yeah, sure, I do. I mean, certainly, the question is, do these pesticides have an effect on us? A lot of people will say yes. Some people will say we're not sure. I think more interesting is the fact that study that Bruce Ames did in 1990 looking at natural pesticides in plants, and they calculated the amount of pesticides, that humans consume, and 99.9% by volume of the pesticides that you and I would consume on a daily basis come in the plants themselves, the pesticides that the plants make naturally. And so if you're concerned about what's sprayed in your plants, you should also be concerned about what's actually in the plants. And so when they tested those natural pesticides that the plants naturally make, and they looked at, looking at animal studies, they found that they tested 52 compounds. 27 of those compounds in foods we eat every day in plants cause cancer in rats. And so that's not to say that, rats are going to give you, eating vegetables are going to give you cancer, but it shows you that there are these toxins that we're consuming every day. And the only thing they really test them for is, do they make you acutely sick or do they give you cancer? What they don't test them for is maybe does it cause your joints to get a little arthritis? Does it cause you to have depression? Does it cause gastrointestinal upset? And those other things. Here's a simple test. If you go around almost all the plants in the environment, 98.5% of the plants in the environment we cannot eat. They'll make us sick. If you go on a field of freshly cut grass and you roll around in your bare skin, most people are going to start itching and have a bad reaction. That's just because the cut plants have all these toxins in them that are not good for us. And that's the only reason we can tolerate some of these vegetables and fruits, is because we have bred out a lot of those toxins to be at lower levels. Now, is that level low enough to where it doesn't make us acutely ill? Yes. And a lot of people do fine with that. But some people, I think chronically it may be causing issues. And that's the thing that no one wants to even ask that question. And I think the best way to answer that question is to eliminate it, do something like an all-meat diet, and then put it back in and then see, well, what happens. And a lot of people will say, wait a minute, when I added, Brussels sprouts back into my diet, I didn't feel as good. I felt, my stomach hurt more, or my knee flared up, or something like that. So it's an interesting way to look at things. It's just,
when I had that experience, like I did before I started the 13 solid days that I have now, I did 1 week, and then I had a day where I was like, oh, I'm going to have some Brussels sprouts, exactly what you just mentioned. And my finger pain, I have like joint pain in a couple of my fingers. And I mean, it's a small symptom, but to me it was enough to know that that's the only thing I did different. I had the Brussels sprouts, and that was the only thing I did different. And that was enough for me to go, okay, something about that, and my body doesn't want it right now.
Yeah, there's a lot. I can tell you, I can point to hundreds and hundreds of people that will say the same thing. And again, like I said, I think one of the things we all share, we're all human beings. I know there's a lot of push towards personalized medicine and personalized nutrition, but I think we all share the capacity to do pretty well, on a meat-based diet. I think we all vary in our capacity to handle and process different plant-based materials. And I think that changes with age and circumstance as well. I think, as you get older, I think your capacity, your physiologic robustness changes. And so I think a lot of people, particularly as they, get older, they find that they just have less and less capacity to deal with those things. They sort of accumulate. So I think some of the most dramatic changes I've seen people on these all meat diets are these people that are 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and then all of a sudden, they drop all that stuff and they notice this dramatic improvement in their health. And I think, one of the reasons we see so many people that kind of are proponents of plant-based diets, they all tend to be really young, for the most part, not always, but that's the biggest population that does that. And they find that, 3 or 4 years in, 5 years in, many of them, I've actually most of them quit within a few months. That's just the statistics. But the ones that stick it out and are really compassionate and really want to push their ethics, they find that a few years later that, they're depressed and they're having all these health issues. They lose their, the point you made, you talked about amenorrhea, where you lose your menstrual cycle. There's a lot of the vegetarian women out there, or vegan women out there that are excited because they think that having a regular, monthly menstrual cycle is somehow a bad thing. And they note that their menstrual cycle goes away, and somehow there's this sort of misguided symptoms of thinking that that's, that menses is a toxin or something like that. I don't understand the rationale of that, but it's common that they lose, their menstrual cycle, and they become infertile as well. And that's something that obviously,
too, especially like PCOS as well. Like just that's becoming so mainstream, and it makes me wonder, like what. That I know, I've always known there's a protein deficiency within our nation. Like I've always felt that most individuals do not get enough protein. And it makes me wonder if that's what some of this infertility can stem from as well.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, we're having basically an epic of infertility, and I think it is nutrition based. And I think probably the more we get away from what we're designed to eat, and I would say that we are, again, highly carnivorous people, and I can point to a number of people that were infertile, and they would switch to a carnivorous diet and they regain their fertility. And so it's just, you just keep seeing all these signs pointing to the fact that, we hunted, millions of large animals for most of our existence, and that we largely exist. If you look in the cave paintings, that's, that's what's on the cave paintings. We know that we've done this for ages. That's what humans, that's what we evolved to do. And
I just recently saw that in Las Vegas. You can go hiking out in like the desert, and there's like this big rock formation of like the old Indians that lived in the deserts of like around Las Vegas, and you could see the writing on the wall of like how they would like use spears and like chase these things, and they were really, I don't remember the word for it, maybe it's like hieroglyphics or something. The cave paintings anyway, but it was really cool to see how that was the mainstay of their focus, was like daily they went out, they hunted, and then they tended to their family, and that was it. So but moving forward, do you want to talk about the N=many study that you just had experience with, and what that's all about?
Yeah, so and we're still analyzing the data from that, so I wish I had the full data out here, but basically, as I did this and became public, a lot of people were interested, but a lot of people also basically just said, well, you're just a kind of a genetic freak, you're an outlier, it doesn't work for everybody else. And I said, well, that's fine. Well, let's put it to the test. And so I sort of just kind of jokingly said, who'd want to eat ribeyes for 3 months? And I had like 400 people quickly to say, yeah, put me in, sign me up. So we actually created a website, another fellow by the name of Matt Mayer, who kind of helped design the tracking tool, and he's still at this point working on it and improving that. We just said, well, let's see who wants to volunteer to do this. So we got several hundred people to do this. We got, most of them to put in their results. And, what we found is basically what I saw. People noted significant improvements in the way they felt. The joint pain went better. We had people that had really bad arthritis. Their arthritis went away. People's blood pressure normalized. We're still looking at some of the labs, but by and large, most of the people's lab values got significantly better. Hemoglobin A1C was very low. The C-reactive protein, which is a measure of inflammation, was very low. Iron levels were normal. One of the concerns was, you retain too much iron. But again, we're just seeing improvements all around for most of the people. There were only, of the people that completed surveys, like 1% to 2% said they didn't feel as good. But the vast majority of them said they noted significant or at least some improvement. So that's, it's interesting. We're still, like I said, we're still analyzing all that data.
Yeah, you can actually go to N=many.com and you can read some of the data that's in that blog about like sleep quality and energy quality and mood, and stuff like that. I thought that was really interesting that all across the board, everybody experienced improvement on like a percentage scale of people that did it the entire time. What percentage continued on the 90 days, and then what dropped out?
Yeah, so I'd say we had about half the people that continued. And one of the things, and it's partly our fault, is a lot of people didn't like logging the data. We asked them to log too much data, so a lot of people got frustrated because it was hard to log the data. So many people stopped from that. There was probably a reasonably significant percentage that dropped out just because they ended up feeling low on energy, and that's a common complaint when people start. And it's usually because it's just like going on a ketogenic diet. You'll experience something like a keto flu, or you'll experience a drop in energy just because you're not eating enough. And that's the one thing that I try to get people to understand is that you have to eat enough, and a lot of people undereat when they start out. That was a major reason for,
I would say that's like awesome.
People don't finish.
Start something new, they tend to just be so trepidatious about it. They do so little, and then they don't feel well because they're not getting the calories.
Well, the other thing is we were really strict, and we tried to make people not drink coffee, and so that was a big sticking point for a lot of people. And just because we really wanted to isolate meat and not have any confounders on that. And so what we're doing now is something called World Carnivore Month, where we've got about 1,000 people signed up doing this. Including you. And so we're allowing coffee and and eggs and a little bit of dairy and stuff like that. So we're not as strict, just because we want to get more compliance and more data. But it was tough for people to go just meat and water from the get-go and give up coffee and alcohol, eggs and dairy. So that was the reason a lot of people dropped out. And I don't think you necessarily have to eliminate that stuff, but just for the sake of eliminating confounders, that's how we tried to do that.
Well, and what were like the main symptoms that you saw, like people that really talked about they turned around for them? Like what were some of those?
Yeah, like I said, joint pain was definitely a huge one. Digestion was a big one. mood, elevation, mood,
Yeah, talk
was
about
good.
experienced that too. My mood is just like through the roof. I've always been a happy person, but this is like I don't have any anxiety anymore.
Yeah, there's a big number of people that will say that their anxiety just completely goes away. Their mood stabilizes. They just feel
Quality.
generally happier. It's pretty common. Yeah, same thing with depression. A lot of people will say that they just have a mood elevation. I think they're not. And again, this is unclear. There's some people that certainly agree that nutrition affects their mental health, and I think that's pretty obvious to me. But one of the things I think when you're on a carbohydrate or sugar-based diet, you're constantly going up and down, and I think that affects your mood. I really do. I know I have a niece who I went and visited my sister over Christmas, and her daughter was eating a bunch of junk and just horrible behavior. And I just said, look, we got to fix this. So we switched her over to a diet that got rid of all the processed grains and sugars. And, my sister's quarterback in a month, her behavior is 70-80% better, which is a huge win. So I think certainly diet impacts behavior, mood, and mental health. There's no doubt about that. The other thing a lot of people report was a significant improvement in libido, which I think is cool.
That is cool.
I think that's an important aspect of health. I know we kind of like to laugh about that, but that's a good indicator of health. So I think that's an important finding.
Well, and that goes right along with the fertility thing. If you're not in the mood to procreate, then you're not going to do really well at that either. So that's great. Exactly. No, I love that. And then what about the differences within the study, or just that you've seen with men and women? Like, how have men done differently than women have?
Well, one, we have a lot more men that sign up for this. I don't know if that's just men tend to like meat more than women, or it's kind of for some reason there's a strong cultural pressure on women to eat salad and sit there and smile and not put dressing on their salad. And so I think a lot of women just have that beat into their head from the time they were little girls. And so men I think sign up for this more easy. But I have to tell you, women just as much as men are saying great. They feel wonderful, and some of it's very liberating for them, if I can use that term. I think it's just you kind of get this freedom from a pressure to eat to social comfort, to conform to social norms in your diet rather than what you're supposed to eat, what you really want to eat.
Mm-hmm. And what about gut health? Like, did you have any, I know you mentioned digestive, but what are your thoughts on how the gut reacts to an all-meat diet?
Well, I think one of the things that a lot of people are seeing is that fiber is actually can be disturbing to the gut. It can be very irritating. And despite the fact that there's a lot of people that push fiber for health, I think fiber in the context of a standard junk food diet is probably somewhat good, but in itself, I don't know how good it is. We can't digest it. It's something that you're pushing through your gut that you can't digest. Bacteria can kind of ferment it a little bit to get some of the nutrition out of there. You can get some short chain fatty acids, but it produces a lot of gas. It's fermentation. It's a lot of bloating that goes with that. So a lot of people just notice. The first thing people tell me is that they're bloating. Their bloated gut goes away. And that's a very common finding. And I would argue that we're not supposed to walk around with bloated guts. I mean, it doesn't feel good, and it's not how we're designed. So that's probably the biggest difference with digestion. I think most people will say that their digestion runs the best it's ever run in their whole life. Once they get through a transition period, there's a several-week transition period where your gut microbiome turns over. You're upregulating certain enzymes that help you digest meat. You're downregulating others, and so there's a transition period where things kind of go a little crazy, where you might have diarrhea, you might feel like you're constipated. One of the common misconceptions is just because you're not having a bowel movement 3 times a day means you're constipated. And what's really happening is you're just not making much in the way of waste. I mean, it's all absorbed. We know from ileostomy patients that don't have a colon, where we can watch what comes out their ileostomy pouch, that when you eat meat, nothing comes out, just a little bit of liquid. So you're just not wasting all that food. all that
Well,
food.
like the fiber you were talking about, even vegetable fiber, your body's going to take what it can use and the rest is not usable. So it's kind of like going through a juicer. When you juice vegetables, you have all this pulp that's left over that you're not using. You take out the juice, but the pulp is all still there and it all comes out. So it's not to say that these gigantic nice poos every day are supposed to indicate that you're idyllic healthy. It's more like you actually are absorbing what you're taking in, so you don't have to eliminate quite as much. So
right, you're eating, much of the nutrition you take in with these fancy organic vegetables goes in the toilet, because you're not even as efficient as a juicing machine, for getting that stuff out. And so much of that nutrition is just, if it doesn't rot in your refrigerator and end up in the trash can, it ends up in your toilet. So you're actually, when you're on a high vegetable diet, you're on a really low calorie diet. I mean, because you're not getting that much nutrition. You're just filled up with fiber. So that's why a lot of people lose weight, but they also, they don't maintain muscle mass. They end up with osteoporosis and some of these other things from lack of, adequate nutrition.
yeah, that's so true. And also, like, I deal with a lot of clients that have low stomach acid. And I find that one of the symptoms of low stomach acid is meat aversion. They will not feel like they can digest meat well. And I think for those listeners out there that are going, well, I don't do meat well, they need to understand that they may have low stomach acid. And that's why for, this amount of time that they've thought that they don't digest meat, they may actually do well just supporting that and building that up, and they'd be able to handle protein better.
Yeah, I think we have a capacity to up and down regulate our gastric acid production. There's people that are chronically on proton pump inhibitors, due to indigestion or reflux, and so that's going to knock down your capacity to digest meat. There's probably something that long-term poor nutrition interferes with, just like everything else. It probably interferes with our digestive capacity. And so I think over time, you can kind of regain some of that capacity back. But initially, there might be some supplements you might need to take for digestion, hydrochloric acid supplements or betaine or sometimes lipase and stuff like that to help with fat. And people are finding success early on when they're first transitioning.
Yeah, that's true too. And I can't help but think about, like, if they're on a proton pump inhibitor, it's almost like, what are they eating that's causing that? Whereas maybe it would be about eliminating those and finding the things that don't cause that reaction. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Before we, I don't want to keep you too much longer because you've been so generous to come on the podcast, but can you talk about something that I'm also a part of called your Carnivore training system, which is very new too?
Yeah, that's just, a lot of people just ask me how I work out all the time, and just because I've been successful in a number of different sports, I've managed to avoid injury, I'm doing stuff at 51 that most people can't do. And so I've had having trained for 40 years with Olympic athletes and world champions and just adopting what works for me and works well, I've kind of developed, basically how I train. And so the people that kept asking me, what do you do? What do you do? I said, well, here, I'm just going to put it out there for people that want to do it. And, it's just a system that helps you develop capacities that I think are important to maintain as we age. So there's some strength training component to that. There's a muscle building component to that. There is a conditioning component to that. And then there's something that I think a lot of people neglect, and that's the ability to move quickly, sprint, and be explosive, because I think that's important to maintain as we get older. And I emphasize that quite a bit in my own personal training, and then, of course, in the system. And
yeah,
so
and I really enjoyed it. I actually have never been someone who worked out with long rests in between, and so this has been a new trait for me to enjoy this workout and go, wow, I get to rest for like 1.5 to 3 minutes right now. But I've never done that because the women mentality is always like, you got to get the most out of your time and you got to push hard and you got to kill yourself and don't take any breaks because then you're not burning calories, you're not burning fat. Well, so for the first time, I'm taking these breaks and I'm coming back to my next set going, I have so much energy right now. I can lift. I think I can go heavier,
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people, they turn their workouts into this long conditioning sets. And And one of the things I like to do is separate out, if I'm in a period of time where I'm working on explosive capacity, I want to have enough rest so that each and every repetition is done as explosively as possible. That's the logic between resting. Now, obviously, you see, I've included some of the conditioning stuff in there where the rest periods are dramatically less and you're getting tired. The whole goal of the workout is not just to be tired. It's about to make progress, to get stronger. And then there are certain times where fatigue and conditioning play a role, but you have to separate those out. If you try to combine those, I think you kind of dilute the effectiveness of both of them.
Yeah. So if people want to check that out, what's the website for that?
carnivoretrainingsystem.com.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. So far, I'm having a lot of fun with it. So one last question for the listeners out there and just kind of wondering about, wow, maybe should I try all meat? Is this the right thing for me? What's kind of a beginner-friendly way to get them to just give it a go and just see what works for them?
Well, I think you have to sort of wrap your head around it psychologically. And so I know if people are into Facebook, I started a Facebook group called World Carnivore Month, where you can kind of get a lot of information. There is a website. It's called justmeat.co that a guy named Michael Goldstein started, which he's a friend of mine that also is a carnivore, which is a really good resource. So justmeat.co. And then, I think I'm very active. I'm always giving feedback to people on Twitter, SBakerMD. My Instagram account is Shawn, SHAWN, Baker, BAKER, 1967. So I'm always putting information out there. Carnivore training system. Again, the other thing with that is I talk about nutrition. I kind of help people walk their way into a carnivorous diet if they wanted to do that route. But
I'll put all those in the show notes too, so people can check that out for sure.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just maybe give it a day, even if people want to alternate days with like having a meat day and then the next day they're just like going to eat their normal way and then have a meat day and add in eggs, add in, like you said, small amounts of dairy or something, see how you do and just kind of play with it, because I think there's really some validity to eating as if this time of year, especially, we had to live off the land.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I kind of did it. I did a couple of days here, a couple of days there, a week here, a week there, and I just gradually stretched out the period of time. And that worked pretty well for me. Granted, I was coming from a ketogenic background, so the transition was a little easier. But then once I kind of said I'm going to do it for 30 days, I really just felt really good. And that's what, I think for a lot of people, you need to do a long enough stretch to really transition through eventually, but leading up to that, if you want to, just have a fully carnivore, bacon and eggs, that's your only meal. That's fine. Go eat a steak and you can add eggs to that or a little piece of cheese and do that time to time, and don't feel like you're pressured. You have to have some green thing on your plate or you have to have a starch on your plate, because you don't. I mean, and a lot of people will find objectively, when they really critically objectively look at that they will feel better just doing that. And it's kind of interesting.
Yes, it really is. And I think if people will do their homework and not, again, just listen to the dogma that we've been preached to about this, that, and the other. And yes, vegetables can have their place for certain individuals. And yes, certain individuals might not fare well on all meat all year, all long, but all live long day. But give it a try and see, because what if you never know? What if you have an underlying condition that, like myself, that could actually be remedied and you had no idea that meat was the way it would heal it? So
yeah, and I think that's a very good point. I think if anything, it's an excellent elimination diet. And so if if your health isn't ideal and you've got some condition that you go to the doctor and the doctor scratches his head and say, oh, bad luck or genetics, well, maybe it's just some plant material taken in. You don't know till you try. And so I cannot tell you how many people have really solved these crazy issues, these autoimmune conditions, just because no one would think to say, well, my gosh, maybe those tomatoes aren't really what I need to be eating. It's
and
it's
for
hard
that
to say.
individual that's so confused, there's so much confusion about what to eat and should I go low fat, should I go low carb? My doctor says this, my nutritionist says that, and I think if people will just think logically about what would I eat right now if I was on my own, and what would I have access to, and what would I have access to in the summer versus now? Maybe I could eat differently in the summer because I would normally have access to fruits and things like that. But if people would just think logically, nutrition can be very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I think eating in such the way that you're doing keeps it kind of simple and straightforward, and you're not hungry too. Like you are only hungry when it's time to eat, and beyond that, you don't have to think about food and wonder, ooh, what am I going to eat next because I'm still hungry after my last meal. So
Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, any other animal nutrition is extremely simple. You don't give your dog a menu, you don't give your dog a calculator and tell them how to eat. I mean, it's
that's what
really,
I've said
really simple.
before. It's like we are not calculators. Like our bodies are not calculators. You don't have to have a macro ratio of this set number you have to hit every day. So, well, Dr. Baker, I so appreciate your time, and thank you so much. And I hope that you'll honor me with maybe coming back in the future and talking about more of the studies and the results that came out and things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Like I said, hopefully we get a bunch of data, and hopefully we get more people to participate. And then I'd love to be able to share that data, as we get it sort of figured out. It's surprisingly, it's harder to analyze that stuff than you think. We went into this just saying, let's just do it. And now we're finding that, man, it's a lot of data. It's like hundreds of thousands of points of data that we have to kind of go through. And so, but
Well,
we'll get it out there.
let me know, because I'm so intrigued by this. Maybe I should just help you read the data, and I can at least do that. So,
All right. Wonderful, Jadelle. Appreciate the time.
thank you so much, and you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Okay.